Two teenage best friends disappeared on a Colorado hike, their campsite left untouched. 5 years later, a chilling discovery buried in the soil revealed a truth that shattered everything we thought we knew. How could someone so trusted hide such a monstrous secret? Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the distant promise of snow, when Mia Delgado and Sophie Carter set out into the vast wildernesses of Colorado's San Juan Mountains. It was a late summer morning in 2018, the kind that makes you feel alive, with sunlight filtering through towering evergreens and the world feeling endless. The two 18-year-olds, inseparable since middle school, were no strangers to these trails. They'd hiked these mountains for years, their backpacks heavy with gear, their laughter echoing through the valleys. But this trip was different. This time, they were chasing something bigger. A remote alpine meadow rumored to host a rare bloom of columbine flowers, a fleeting beauty that only appeared for a few weeks each year. Their parents, nervous but proud, had insisted on one condition: a satellite tracker, a small device clipped to Sophie's pack, blinking silently to mark their path. It was their lifeline, a promise of safety in the wild. But when the girls didn't return on schedule, that promise turned into a nightmare. I still think about this case sometimes, the way it unraveled like a thread pulled from a sweater, revealing something dark and twisted beneath. Mia and Sophie weren't reckless kids. They were careful, experienced, the kind of hikers who checked their maps twice and always packed extra water. Mia, with her quick wit and infectious grin, could make any trail feel like an adventure. Sophie, quieter but fiercely capable, was the planner, the one who memorized every ridge and stream. Their parents, Elena Delgado and the Carters, had watched them drive off that August morning, waving from the trailhead with a mix of pride and unease. The girls had promised to check in via the tracker every night. By Sunday evening, August 19th, they were due back at their car, ready to call home with stories of starry nights and flower-filled meadows. But 8 p.m. passed. Then 10 p.m., Elena sat by her phone, her coffee growing cold, waiting for Maya's voice. By midnight, dread had settled in her chest like a stone. Imagine if you're a parent staring at your phone, willing it to ring, knowing your child is out there in a wilderness that doesn't care about promises. Would you wait, or would you act? Elena couldn't wait. She logged into the satellite tracker's online portal, her fingers shaking as the map loaded. The last ping was from Friday night, 2 days earlier, at a remote campsite deep in the San Juans. No updates since, no SOS signal, just a single unmoving dot on a topographic map, frozen in time. Elena called Sophie's parents and the panic was mutual. Something was wrong. By Monday morning, they'd contacted the La Plata County Sheriff's Office, and the names Mia Delgado and Sophie Carter entered the system as missing persons. The search began with a frantic urgency. Search and rescue teams, with their orange vests and grim determination, fanned out into the mountains. The San Juans are no place for the unprepared. Jagged peaks, dense forests, and sudden storms that can turn a clear day deadly. The coordinates from the tracker led to a small clearing, a textbook campsite by a gurgling creek. The girls' tent was still pitched, its zippers sealed tight. Their backpacks, bright red and navy, leaned against a tree, packed as if ready to move. A coal fire pit sat nearby, ash scattered like a forgotten thought. Inside the tent, sleeping bags were rolled, food was stored in bare canisters, and their water purifier sat untouched. The satellite tracker rested on a rock, its green light blinking steadily. Everything was in place, pristine, as if Mia and Sophie had simply stepped away for a moment. But the forest was silent, and the girls were gone. The scene was haunting in its normalcy. No torn gear, no blood, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the mountain had swallowed them whole. Why would two seasoned hikers who knew the risks of the wild abandon their camp without a trace? The question gnawed at the searchers, at the families, at everyone who heard the story. Elena provided photos to the teams, snapshots from a practice hike just a week before. In one, Mia, in a teal jacket, flashed a peace sign at the camera, her dark hair spilling from a ponytail. Sophie, in a gray hoodie, stood beside her, her shy smile barely hiding her excitement. They were at a trailhead, the San Juans stretching endlessly behind them, a world of possibility. That image, so full of life, clashed with the eerie stillness of the campsite. The search escalated quickly. Helicopters thumped overhead, their blades slicing through the mountain air. Ground crews scoured ridges and valleys, while canine units sniffed for any trace. Elena and the Carters camped at the trailhead, their face etched with exhaustion and hope. They clung to every update, every radio crackle, praying for a sign. Investigators combed through the campsite, cataloging every item. Among the gear, they found something curious. A worn field guide to Rocky Mountain wildflowers, its pages tabbed to mark the elusive columbine. Notes in Sophie's neat handwriting circled locations at higher elevations, suggesting a side trip to find the flowers. It was a lead, a fragile thread. Maybe the girls had left for a quick hike, expecting to return. But why hadn't they? Days turned into weeks, and the search grew desperate. The San Juans are vast, their terrain unforgiving. A hiker could slip into a ravine, twist an ankle, or get caught in a sudden storm. But Mia and Sophie were prepared. They had the gear, the knowledge, the tracker. The absence of an SOS signal was baffling. Either the device had failed, or they hadn't had the chance to use it. Leads trickled in, each one a fleeting hope. A gas station clerk 40 miles away claimed to have seen two girls matching their description buying snacks on Saturday afternoon. The tip sent investigators scrambling, but the security footage was blurry, and the girls turned out to be locals, unrelated to the case. The disappointment crushed Elena, who spent nights poring over maps, whispering to herself, "Where are you, Mia?" By mid-September, the weather turned cruel. Snow dusted the peaks, and the nights grew bitter. The massive search effort, involving hundreds of volunteers, was scaled back. The girls' names began to fade from headlines, their stories slipping into the realm of unsolved mysteries. For Elena, the silence was unbearable. She hired private trackers, refusing to let the case die. She'd stand at the trailhead, staring into the mountains, as if they might whisper the truth. The campsite, that perfect, untouched scene, became a ghost story among locals, a warning to hikers about the wilderness's hidden dangers. But for the families, it was a wound that wouldn't heal, a question that lingered like fog over the peaks. What happened to Mia and Sophie? 5 years passed, the San Juans bloomed and froze, as if mocking the search for answers. In 2023, during a warm September day, a lone hiker named Caleb Morrow was trekking through a remote section of the forest, miles from any trail. Caleb, a 40-year-old photographer with a love for the untamed, was chasing shots of golden aspen groves. His camera hung heavy around his neck as he navigated a steep ravine, the ground soft with pine needles. His dog, a scrappy mutt named Rusty, trotted alongside, nose to the ground. Suddenly, Rusty froze, his hackles up, and bolted toward a gnarled, fallen spruce. The dog pawed at the earth, whining, digging with a frenzy Caleb had never seen. "Rusty, easy," Caleb called, but the dog wouldn't stop. Caleb approached, expecting a squirrel's nest or a buried bone. Instead, Rusty unearthed something that made Caleb's stomach lurch. A fragment of bone, weathered and gray, half buried in the soil. It wasn't animal, it was human, a piece of a femur, unmistakable in its shape. Caleb's breath caught as he scanned the area, the forest suddenly too quiet. He knelt, brushing away dirt, and found more fragments. Ribs, a vertebra, and then something that stopped him cold. Lodged in a chunk of spine was a small, rusted metal object, glinting dully in the sunlight. It was a bullet, old and corroded, embedded deep in the bone. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Caleb's hands shook as he marked the spot with his GPS. He was miles from cell service, alone with a grim discovery. He wrapped the spine fragment in his jacket, secured Rusty, and began the long hike to a ranger station. The weight of the bone in his pack felt heavier than it should, a silent accusation. At the station, he handed over the evidence, his voice steady but strained as he described the find. The Rangers listened, their faces hardening. They knew the stories of the San Juans, the missing hikers, the case that never closed. Within hours, a forensic team was dispatched to the site, and the investigation roared back to life. The coordinates led to a dense, untraveled part of the forest, where the spruce's roots had created a natural grave. The excavation was slow, methodical, every bone fragment cataloged under the watchful eyes of investigators. The remains were incomplete, scattered by time and wildlife, but the bullet was the key. It was no modern round, it was a .45 caliber, the kind used in older revolvers, rare in today's world. The discovery sent a chill through the team. This wasn't a random act. Someone had killed with intent, burying the body where it might never be found. But whose body was it? The remains were sent to a forensic lab in Denver, where anthropologists worked to identify them. The process was grueling, DNA degraded by years in the soil, no dental records immediately matching. The bullet, though, was a clue sent to ballistics experts. It was hand-cast, a relic of a bygone era, suggesting a killer with a peculiar obsession. As the lab worked, Detective Laura Hensley, a seasoned cold case investigator, took charge. She knew the San Juan cases, had studied Mia and Sophie's file for years. The timing, the location, it all pointed to them. But the question lingered. Was this one of the girls, or another victim entirely? Laura sat with Elena and the Carters, their faces a mix of hope and dread. She showed them the evidence, explained the bullet's strangeness. Elena clutched a photo of Mia, tears falling silently. "Is it her?" she whispered. Laura couldn't answer yet, but the weight of the question pressed on her. The lab results came back after weeks of agonizing wait. The remains were Sophie Carter's. The identification hit like a tidal wave, confirming a murder, but leaving a gaping hole. Where was Mia? The bullet suggested a killer who was calculated, deliberate, someone who knew the mountains intimately. But the absence of Mia's remains opened a new terrifying possibility. Had she escaped, or was she buried elsewhere, waiting to be found? Sophie was dead, killed by a bullet from a forgotten era, but Mia's fate remained a mystery. Was she still out there, or had the killer hidden her in the shadows of the San Juans, where even the mountains kept their secrets? The discovery of Sophie Carter's remains, a single hand-cast bullet lodged in her spine, cracked open a 5-year-old wound in the San Juan Mountains. Mia Delgado, her best friend, was still missing, a ghost in the vast wilderness that had already claimed one life. Detective Laura Hensley stood at the edge of the excavation site, the scent of damp earth and pine heavy in the air, her mind racing. The bullet, a .45 caliber relic from another era, pointed to a killer who was meticulous, someone who used the mountain's isolation as a cloak. The core of this story, trust shattered by authority, the false promise of nature's safety, and the unrelenting ache of loss, pushed Laura to chase the truth, no matter how dark. As she dug deeper, the investigation uncovered a predator hiding behind a badge, and the mountains whispered secrets that would change everything. Sophie's identification hit the families like a landslide. Elena Delgado sat in her dimly lit kitchen, a photo of Mia crumpled in her hand, her eyes red from sleepless nights. Sophie's parents, the Carters, were broken, their daughter's death confirmed by a forensic report that described a single brutal shot to the back. The bullet had severed her spine, killing her instantly on that August morning in 2018. Mia's absence was a tormenting riddle. Had she escaped, or was she buried in another forgotten corner of the San Juans? Laura met with the families at the sheriff's office, her voice steady but laced with empathy. "We're not giving up on Mia," she said, her gaze meeting Elena's. "This bullet is our key. We'll find who did this." But privately, Laura felt the weight of time, 5 years of silence pressing against her resolve. The bullet was their strongest lead. Ballistics experts confirmed it was hand-cast, a .45 caliber round, rare and archaic, the kind used in revolvers from decades past. It wasn't mass-produced, it was crafted with intent, suggesting a killer with a deep knowledge of firearms, perhaps a collector or a craftsman. Laura's team scoured the region for anyone with access to such ammunition: hunters, historical reenactors, even survivalists. But the burial site, miles from any trail, pointed to someone who knew the San Juans intimately. Someone who could navigate its ravines and ridges without leaving a trace. This wasn't a random act. This was personal, calculated, and chillingly precise. Imagine, Batish, you're deep in those mountains, the stars overhead, the silence so thick it feels alive. Then you hear a twig snap behind you. Would you turn or would you run, trusting the darkness to hide you? I stumbled across this case in a dusty archive file at a local library, and it stayed with me. The way it shows how trust can be a trap, how beauty can mask horror. Laura felt that too, poring over the 2018 case files late into the night, her coffee cold, her desk littered with maps. The campsite, frozen in time with its untouched gear, suggested an ambush. Swift, silent, no chance for the girls to fight. The field guide to Columbines, with Sophie's careful notes, hinted they'd ventured off for a quick hike. But the tracker's lack of an SOS signal gnawed at Laura. Had it been disabled, or had the girls been stopped before they could press it? A breakthrough came from the original search records. Park Ranger Ethan Caldwell, a 15-year veteran, had been one of the first to reach the girls' campsite in 2018. His report was detailed, almost too perfect, noting the tent's sealed zippers, the blinking tracker, the pristine scene. But Laura noticed something else. Ethan had logged at extra patrols in the weeks before the disappearance, always in the remote areas near the girls' route. It was a pattern, subtle but deliberate. Ethan was a local hero, known for guiding lost hikers to safety, his calm demeanor a fixture at the visitor center. But heroes can hide shadows, and Laura's instincts screamed that Ethan was more than he seemed. Digging into Ethan's past, Laura found a troubling detail. In 2017, he'd been reprimanded for removing evidence from a poaching case, a set of antique .45 caliber bullets confiscated from a hunter. The incident was minor, the bullets returned, but it raised a red flag. Laura requested the Forest Service's evidence logs, her team sifting through years of faded paperwork. They found it. In July 2018, a month before the girls vanished, Ethan had checked out a batch of hand-cast .45 caliber bullets for a training display. The log showed no record of their return. The timing was too precise, the coincidence too stark. Ethan, a trusted ranger, had access to the murder weapon and the wilderness expertise to hide a body where no one would look. Laura's team placed Ethan under surveillance, their movements cautious to avoid tipping him off. Ethan's routine was deceptively normal: morning patrols, paperwork, chats with hikers. But at dusk, he'd drive to remote trailheads, slipping into the forest for hours. One night, under a moonless sky, the team followed him to a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. Ethan stood motionless, staring into the darkness, his silhouette eerie against the pines. Was he revisiting the scene, reliving his crime? Laura's heart pounded as she watched through binoculars, the weight of the case pressing harder. She needed concrete evidence, something to tie Ethan to Sophie's death, and to Mia. To build the case, Laura pulled security footage from the visitor center, where Mia, Sophie, and Elena had stopped for their practice hike on August 12, 2018. The grainy video showed the girls at a map display, their laughter bright, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. In the background, Ethan stood by a rack of brochures, his eyes locked on them. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, his posture rigid. For nearly 10 minutes he lingered, then slipped out of frame as the girls left. The footage was chilling, a predator choosing his moment. Laura felt a knot in her stomach. Ethan had likely been stalking them from that day, mapping their route, waiting for his chance. Laura brought Ethan in for questioning, framing it as a review of the 2018 search. He sat across from her in a sterile room, his ranger uniform crisp, his face a mask of calm. "I searched for those girls like they were my own," he said, his voice steady. But when Laura slid the evidence log across the table, pointing to his signature next to the bullets, his eyes flickered. "Those were for a display," he muttered, his fingers tapping nervously. Laura leaned in, her voice low. "They were never returned, Ethan, and one of those bullets killed Sophie Carter." His face paled, his words stumbling. "You're wrong, Dad." he snapped but his hands shook as he demanded a lawyer. Lara knew she'd struck a nerve. With probable cause, Lara secured a warrant for Ethan's cabin, a secluded property nestled in the forest's edge. The tactical team moved in at first light, the air sharp with frost. The cabin was sparse, almost sterile, maps pinned to the walls, ranger gear neatly stacked. But a locked shed behind the house drew their attention. The door was heavy, reinforced, out of place for a simple storage unit. Inside, they found a workshop, tools, ammunition, and a mold for casting .45 caliber bullets, identical to the murder weapon. Under a tarp, a box held more hand-cast rounds, their surfaces polished like trophies. The discovery was damning, but Lara needed Mia. The team noticed a faint seam in the shed's floor, hidden under a workbench. They pried it open, revealing a trapdoor to a cellar, its air cold and stale. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a nightmare. A small, soundproofed room, its walls lined with insulation. A rusted cot sat in one corner, its bedding stained and tattered. Heavy chains were bolted to the floor, scratches marking the walls like desperate cries. Dark stains, likely blood, spotted the concrete. Lara's breath caught. This was a prison, a place of unimaginable suffering. The realization hit her like a blade. Ethan had kept someone here, maybe for years. Cadaver dogs swept the woods behind the shed, their noses low, their handlers tense. Within an hour, a dog alerted at a shallow depression, its whine piercing the silence. The team dug, each shovelful heavy with dread. At 3 feet, they found her, Mia Delgado, her remains wrapped in a frayed sleeping bag, her body curled as if still seeking warmth. The forensic report was a gut punch. Mia had died in late 2021, over 3 years after Sophie. Her bones showed signs of starvation, her wrists scarred from restraints. She'd been held captive, enduring horrors while the world moved on. Lara stood at the site, tears burning her eyes, the weight of failure crushing her. Mia had been alive, suffering, while they searched in vain. The investigation pieced together Ethan's crime. He'd spotted the girls at the visitor center, his obsession sparked by their youth and freedom. Using his ranger access, he tracked them to their campsite, ambushing them on August 14, 2018. Sophie fought, and he shot her with the stolen bullet, burying her in a remote ravine to frame a local reenactor group with a history of disputes. Maya, too terrified to resist, was taken to the cellar where Ethan kept her hidden, his badge a perfect shield. For 3 years, he maintained his facade, patrolling the trails by day, returning to his prisoner by night. Mia's death, likely from neglect, came when her body gave out, and Ethan buried her close, believing the forest would keep his secret. Ethan was arrested, charged with murder, kidnapping, and prolonged abuse. In court, he sat silent, his face a blank slate, offering no confession, no remorse. The evidence, bullets, footage, the cellar, Mia's remains, was ironclad. In 2020, Ethan Caldwell was convicted, sentenced to life without parole. Elena and the Carters sat through the trial, their grief a quiet storm. The truth offered no comfort, only the agony of knowing Mia had suffered for years, hidden just beyond their reach. The San Juans, once a sanctuary, now stood as a monument to betrayal. A man entrusted to protect had used his authority to destroy, his uniform a mask for a monster. For the families, the loss was a scar that would never fade, a reminder that evil can hide in the most trusted places. Late at night, when I think about this case, I see Mia's photo, her smile frozen in time, and I wonder how many others are out there, their cries silenced by those we're taught to trust, their stories buried in the soil of our faith. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.